Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace, my go-to for building a website and online shop. Hello darlings, as promised, today's video is the continuation of last month's video where I started this giant figure painting. Last month I painted the figure, and today I'll be painting the environment and finishing up the entire piece. Real quick before I begin, if you'd like to see a 60-minute tutorial of this video with a thorough color mixing demo, along with hundreds of hours of exclusive content, plus monthly art rewards, feel free to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/happydartist. This piece now marks the fourth figure painting this year that I've started in our classroom model sessions and finished by adding a fantasy background afterwards. By now, I've become acclimated to this chaotic process, and I welcome all the challenges that come my way. One huge challenge in adding in the background elements after already finishing rendering the figure is to keep the lighting consistent. I was fortunate enough to have been able to observe exactly where the light source was placed, so I know how to design the environment to follow a similar lighting setup. However, even if I keep the lighting setup and angle consistent, I'm still dealing with a slight issue in contrast because our model was situated in a pitch black room with one bright spotlight on top of her. Whereas in my painting, I wanted her in a daytime environment with more soft ambient lighting as well as a bright light source from above. Therefore, as I was painting the figure, I had to keep in mind the difference in lighting contrast I was observing versus the effect I wanted to portray. So I had to make sure to lighten and soften some of the shadows on her body and reduce the contrast in order for her to fit in later with the softer, lower contrast environment. Another challenge of adding a background after the figure has already been completed is keeping the perspective consistent. I have to admit, perspective is not something I thought about much at all prior to coming to art school, as I primarily painted zoomed-in portraits and I didn't need to consider how to integrate the subject with the environment in a consistent and accurate perspective grid. But nowadays, I have to consider perspective even if the environment is organic and natural, such as the one here. Our teachers always ask us to think about the eye level of the viewer. So for example, if we try to think of the painting as a shot captured by a camera, we have to ask ourselves, how is the camera positioned in relationship to the figure? Is the camera higher and pointing down at the figure, or is the camera lower and pointing up at the figure? In my case, I was sitting at a pretty centered eye level looking at the model, so I wasn't dramatically pointing up or down. So I had to make sure to keep the perspective of the horizontal planes in the environment consistent with that viewpoint, particularly the surface of the boulder she is sitting on, the plane of the shallow water at her feet, and the elevation of the faraway waterfall elements in the distance. The amount of all these elements to show is similar to how if you take a selfie from a super high angle directly above, you'll see more of the floor underneath your feet. And if you take a selfie pointing up, you'll see the ceiling above your head. Since I'm framing this painting from not too high and not too low, I can get a nice balance of sky and ground plane elements. This is also why it's a benefit to not sit too close to the model when you're painting from life, because you'll end up with a kind of fish eye lens effect where you'll be looking up at the model to paint their head and then looking down to paint their feet, resulting in a distorted kind of fish eye view. So, in class, the teachers ask us to place our easels farther away from the model, and also we place the model on a raised platform that is a nice moderate elevation from the ground so that we will usually be at a centered eye level when we observe the model, given that we are painting standing up or sitting on tall stools. The last challenge of adding in the environment after painting the figure is the color harmony. I have to make sure the colors of her skin tones and hair complement the colors of her surroundings. But without painting the surroundings first, I have no way to visualize or evaluate how the skin tones will look next to a future background. That's where a small color study is really helpful, as evident in the first video of this series from 2 months ago. Smaller color studies allow you to quickly test out different compositions, color palettes, and values on a smaller scale so that you can get a preview of how everything will play together in the larger painting. I realized in my color study that I need to integrate more cool tones into the figure in order to integrate the figure seamlessly into the greens and blues of the environment. So I made sure to add faint touches of blue to the highlights and darker bounce lights, and mixed in more greens into the midtones of her skin. This worked out great when it came time to paint the environment because it felt like the light was bouncing off of the green foliage and blue waters onto her skin, and she didn't look too out of place. And that about wraps up this painting. Thank you all for following along with this journey over the course of 3 videos in 3 months. If you'd like to adopt the original or fine art prints, they're both listed in my shop at happyd-artist.com. And of course, you guessed it, my eternal never-ending sale is still going on in my shop, so if you'd like 20% off your order of prints and originals, just enter the code HOLIDAY at happyd-artist.com. And if you're interested in learning more about how to paint and draw, I have lots of art educational content on my Patreon page, including exclusive video tutorials, step-by-step photo tutorials, live streams, podcasts, and even surprise art gift boxes. All available at patreon.com/happydartist. I'd love to have you join my Patreon family. A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video and supporting the art community. Squarespace is the best platform to create a professional website and online shop. Their beautifully designed templates are easy to use for beginners and look great on both desktop and mobile. I've sold my art through Squarespace for almost 10 years, and I can attest to the quality of their online commerce features, whether you want to sell digital or physical items. They also provide useful analytics that help you make the most of your online business. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/happydartist to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Also, if you want to check out more artworks, works in progress, and just random daily artist adventures, feel free to check out my Instagram, and you can follow me at the handle @happydartist.